What I've learned about how leaders show up, especially in challenging times like this, that's what I'm going to be talking about today on Time with Tim. So there were two occasions last week that really stood out to me when I had calls from 4i clients that really landed with me about just, wow, that is how you show up as a leader in this world, in what we're going through right now. And that also drew me to a comparison, particularly one thing that one of them said with a book that I read quite recently by Stephen Fry, Heroes. And there's just one segment in that I immediately reflected on, having had one of these conversations. So let me just share these two client interaction anecdotes with you. So both of these clients called really to check in. You know, me as a supplier to them, they were calling me to check in. And essentially, both of them had this very similar modality of empathy. You know, they were keen and open to share what they were going through and, you know, how COVID-19 has impacted on them and their families and their businesses. But firstly, they wanted to ask how I was doing and they wanted to listen. And that was interesting to me because normally, you know, I'm on the other side of that. It's me asking the questions, you know, as a coach and a leader of a leadership development business. It was intriguing that was the way that they approached it. But then as they responded and reciprocated as I put the question back to them, it became very, very clear that this is how they're showing up in their own businesses. They're asking, they're thinking, they're having well-being check-ins with their team. One guy was having a twice daily 15-minute check-in with his leadership team and then booking in or having his direct reports book in directly after the senior leadership team all hands a 15-minute check-in with all of their direct reports so that they could immediately communicate everything that's happening and that they were listening in those sessions more than they were talking as the leaders. And I think that really, really is important. I mean, there's a book up there, Simon Sinek, you know, Leaders Eat Last. You know, there's been a lot written about leaders who should talk last. And whether or not that can be the case right now, when there's a lot of information that needs to be dispensed, there's a lot of, you know, sort of communication that must come first so that people can receive a little bit of certainty and certainly, hopefully, a dose of clarity. But that was very, very important. Both these leaders also were very keen to convey a very sort of sincere and truthful sense of how much value, you know, they've received from the work that 4i have done with them and how important they view us as being to them. And then again, they were reflecting that they're doing the same thing with their team, you know, and people, even if, you know, they're people that they're having to stand down, you know, sort of giving them as much of a sense as they could in the most direct language that they can use. You are really vitally important. We're having to do this in order to survive, and we want your importance to be known and hopefully retained as long as possible. So what this made me think of, and this line in Stephen Fry's book, is from the Labours of Hercules. So Hercules, you know, was, you know, one of the strongest, most powerful heroes in Greek mythology. And there's this particular time in his life where he essentially frees a guy called Prometheus from his torture. So he was basically being sort of persecuted by the gods, Prometheus was, for something that he had done to offend Zeus, the king of the gods. And Hercules frees Prometheus, and then they get into a conversation which Stephen Fry quite sort of comically breaks down into this little kind of, hey, how you going, you know, matey type conversation. And in this conversation, Hercules is kind of pouring his heart out a bit about, you know, how tough it is being a hero, and, you know, he's had to do all these labours, and, you know, he's been through this really sort of gruesome episode you know, quite recently. And Prometheus turns to him and says, you know, look, you can choose to be a hero, or you can choose essentially to go and have, you know, a cabin in the woods and just live your life, right? You can believe in fate and that this is your fate and that you are essentially locked in to doing this work, or you can choose to go and do something else. And Hercules considers this and essentially says, okay, now you put it like that, I choose to be a hero, and I accept the labours, and I accept the pain and the harshness that heroism brings with it. And as I read that in the book, it struck me, and it struck me again listening to these two leaders last week, really sort of opening up and sharing how challenging they're finding life at the moment, running quite large corporations. And with one of them, I reflected this commentary back, and it made him smile, I think, and he even laughed a little bit at one point, as tough as it was to hear it. But leadership is hard. Right now, it's extremely hard, but it is also a choice. It's a choice that I'm glad to make. It's one that, I bear, seriously, and I will keep showing up to do. But it is a choice, and it's a choice I hope you're pleased and proud to have made. And it's also a choice to keep showing up and keep improving your leadership. Thanks for listening. I'll see you tomorrow.